starts at Two Brothers. Delicious food, great bar, great location. Less than a half mile from campus. Two Brothers. Smoked Meats, new building. Awesome place to hang out this weekend. It'll be rocking tonight. And then throughout the weekend in Stark Vegas. Also, shout out to Welcome Home Beef. If you see Welcome Home Beef in any of your grocery stores, pick it up. I mean, they're now in well over, I think they told me 100 grocery stores. Obviously, they still have their retail location in Starkville. Load up your cooler with steaks, porterhouses, ribeyes, and fillets. WelcomeHomeBeef.com. But you can find them all over. Olive Branch, Corinth, Tupelo, Starkville, all throughout the state of Mississippi. WelcomeHomeBeef.com. Out of Bounds, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN. All right, cool. We'll have Kyle Peterson coming up here in just a minute. College Baseball Insider, ESPN, SEC Network. Y'all saw him over the weekend calling games. Ole Miss played for a while in the SEC baseball tournament. KP does a good job. He played at Stanford, but he's all aboard the SEC train, knowing that it is the most dominant, most talented, deepest, baddest conference in all of college baseball. We all saw that on Monday when they released the NCAA tournament brackets as far as national seeds, hosts, and just teams that got in. Even Alabama got in. So roll tide. Nick Saban made that happen. Or maybe it was John Cohen, since John's father was a law professor at Alabama. The man knows no. I mean, evidently he was able to manipulate 9 other committee members and 15 other regionals, which is impossible. But who knows? Anyway, Alabama did make the tournament. I guess Georgia may only have the only gripe, so to speak. Scott Strickland, not the one at Florida. Scott Strickland, the head baseball coach at Georgia. Probably pretty frustrated. I wonder if he's getting on the hot. They don't care enough. Not even sure Josh Brooks knows that Scott Strickland's his baseball coach. Anyway, Georgia did not make it, but Bama was in.
Scott Strickland will get fired if Kirby Smart has a bad year.
That's right. That's what
Isn't that messed up?
Jeremy Foley did to Pat McMahon.
That's what I'm saying.
Right? Incredible.
Somebody's got to take the blame.
I'm in a bad mood. Somebody,
How are we doing in women's field hockey? Somebody's getting fired.
Yeah. What was it? It was Billy Donovan didn't take the NBA job at that time. He eventually did. But he didn't take it, and Foley thought he was going to be in a coaching search for hoops. And so he walked down the hall and fired Pat McMahon, who was 1 year removed from the national championship series.
Incredible.
Wow. And then you got O'Sully Sullivan at Florida.
Hey, but these are the smartest people in the world, right, making these decisions. Yeah.
But, hey, Duke's going to replace Mike Krzyzewski with John Shire.
We talked about this.
That's like me replacing Nick Saban.
We mentioned this in the break. Mike Krzyzewski from 1984 to 2020 had 5 seasons where they lost 10 or more games. That's what you told me. That's 40. Yeah, but I told you off the air. We didn't tell. We not said that on.
Can
the
I tell you about that '85 team real quick?
Yeah,
that's the team I fell in love with. Johnny Dawkins, Tommy Amaker,
his first true
Jay
good team.
Billis, Allery, and those guys. They lost to Never Nervous Purvis and Denny Crum in that terrible comb-over in the national championship game. And as a 12-year-old, I was devastated.
That was his first.
That may have been the last time I cried in sports.
Yeah, that was his first true run in the NCAA tournament. Was that '85 team?
And he credits. Well, that doc was on last night. He credits that class with Jay Billis, Tommy Amaker, and Johnny Dawkins and that crew as turning the tide in the program. Believe it or not, it would be 6 more seasons before Coach K would punch his ticket, Blake.
But
in 91.
He was consistently running deep to the turn. That was the first run in the tournament, and it didn't stop there. That catapulted them to where he was winning multiple games every year.
Right.
He ended up going 90-30 in or 90-40 in like 35 NCAA tournament appearances.
Is that good?
It's pretty good. As we mentioned, 12 regular season, 15 tournament conference championships.
But does he have your AAU expertise in the fact that you played Bernardo Sidney?
But I will say he did put 40 draft players in 40 years, which is a remarkable number. for a college basketball team.
No question.
And again, he started with a slightly over 500 and then 2 under 500 seasons. So,
almost got fired in year 3.
Three
It's
seasons.
It's a great story in the book One-on-One by John Feinstein. Krzyzewski walked out of the ACC tournament in year 3 and had dinner with some of his coaches and John Feinstein, and he thought he would get fired. Instead, the next morning, what happened? He was offered a contract extension. It was the same thing that happened to Dabo Swinney.
And the rest is history.
That's right.
And when I think of Krzyzewski and the longevity, he's the last. He and Roy Williams retiring. It's kind of like when Bowden retired at Florida State. It's like when Beamer retired at Virginia Tech. I think of Bianco a little bit, although baseball is a little bit more like this, even modern-wise. But, it's kind of a dying breed of coaches who spend their tenure, either all of it or the majority of it, as the head guy at one place.
I know.
You just don't see. I mean, the Krzyzewski, the Williams, the Beamer, the Bowden, it just doesn't happen anymore.
Johnny Vaught.
Yeah, he's the only one.
Okay, from 47 to 1970, then comes back for 8 games.
Yep.
Because Billy Kennard only coached 3 games.
Like
a
4
couple
years later.
later, okay?
Yeah.
And then Ron Polk tried to name his successor in his second stint. And again, for Mississippi State fans, thank God Greg Burns said no and hired John Cohen. So there, man, it's interesting what just happened at North Carolina and Duke. They could have hired almost anybody.
Anyone. Not
they,
almost.
They both
anyone.
promoted from within with assistant coaches that have no head coaching experience.
Is that because you need a buffer between a goat and a not, like the next guy?
Yes, I think so.
They knew they weren't. No one wants to follow the best of all time.
That's why Dabo's not following Saban. Live in the Bank Plus studio, the Out of Bounds Show is brought to you by Mississippi Ag. That's where you get your next John Deere tractor for your land. Manage your land at Mississippi Ag, 2 locations, Canton and Pearl, agup.com, Mississippi Ag. And the show is also brought to you by Mississippi Sports Medicine and Orthopedic Center. New surgery center and clinic, Lakeland Drive, Flowood. Visit MississippiSportsMedicine.com for more information. Thanks for hanging out with us. This is the Out of Bounds Show, 105.9 The Zone. ESPN, we're streaming live on the Out of Bounds radio app. You can watch the show right now on Facebook and YouTube. Search the Out of Bounds Show. We want to welcome in Kyle Peterson, college baseball insider, ESPN, the SEC Network, and KP joins us on the Modelo guest line. What a time of year, as we'll head to Starkville later today. KP, good morning. Welcome in.
Good morning. Good to talk to you again.
Well, so here we go. We've had all kinds of conspiracy theories going on here in the state of Mississippi. John Cohen was on the committee, so Ole Miss thinks that they got a tough draw and that Mississippi State got an easy draw because John Cohen was on the committee, although you have to excuse yourself when they're talking about your team. Any thoughts there before we jump in to the regionals talk?
Any thoughts on the conspiracy theory?
Yeah. Have you seen it? You haven't seen it on the Twitters between Ole Miss and Miss? You've been traveling around the country and so on.
No, I haven't. I've stayed away from the conspiracy theory. I try to stay away from every conspiracy theory, whatever it may be. But no, in this case, I don't think that's the case.
All right, let's jump into the Oxford Regional and Ole Miss. They're going to play Southeast Missouri State, but we know that obviously Florida State and Southern Miss are in the regional. You've had an opportunity to see them all year, and then they played for a while in Hoover, in which you were there the whole time. As you look at the matchup, what could cause the biggest who could cause the biggest problems for Ole Miss in this regional, KP?
Well, I think there's 3 teams that you could look at as those that could really come out of it. And I don't know if I would give an overwhelming favorite to any of them. And Southern Miss and Florida State are right there. I saw Florida State a few times this year. Florida State's good. I mean, Florida State's a team that could make it to Omaha. It's a very similar team that made it to Omaha 2 years ago. But I think they may have better pitching than they did then. And then Southern Miss, that Conference USA was a dogfight this year. And there's 4 teams from that league that got in. So, and obviously, Southern Miss is not going to be wowed by the environment. They've been in that environment before. So I wouldn't be surprised if any one of those 3 came out. And I don't know that I would give any one of them any huge advantage over the rest. Ole Miss probably, because they're playing at home and they get to play the 4-game one, but I don't think it's a huge advantage.
And here's what has been a big topic on our show this week. KP, is what Lemonis and Bianco should do tomorrow. It's this whole debate. Do you throw your ace? Then you look at the matchup. Bianco comes out and says he's going to throw Derek Diamond. He's going to hold Nikhazy. We'll see where he drops in McDaniel later. Lemonis has yet to announce. There's some maybe strong current that Will Bednar will go because Sanford is so right-handed dominant at the plate. And McLeod's been very up and down, and they really don't have a third starter. What is your approach and takeaway on what these head coaches have to go through on, do I throw my number one guy or do I throw someone else on Friday?
Well, if you're going to throw somebody else, you got to be really comfortable they're going to throw strikes, because I think you have a talent advantage day one. Whether you throw your second guy in 95% of the cases, whether you throw your second guy or your third guy, you still have a pretty distinct talent advantage. Where you can get into trouble is if whoever that guy isn't throwing strikes and you got to go to the bullpen too early. Then that's when issues start. So as long as whoever it is somebody that can throw strikes, I am all for saving an ace until day two, because if you win, which you have a talent advantage, it's just a percentages play for me. I have a significantly high percentage chance to win day one if I put X on the mound or Y on the mound. And the next day, I feel like I've got a better chance if I put Y on the mound. All right, so I'm going to throw X day one, whoever it is. Now, there could be certain situations to where you're facing a one that has a real guy on the other side from an arm standpoint, and you feel like matchup-wise, hey, we got to use an ace, and I get it. But in most cases, that's not the situation. And that's the biggest advantage to being a one.
Okay. Kyle Peterson on the Modelo guest line talking NCAA regionals, as we'll get them started tomorrow throughout the country, but in Oxford and Starkville, so it should be exciting. Mississippi State goes with the day game, and Ole Miss will go with the night game. John Cohen walked us through why they like to go with that 2 p.m. game a couple of days ago. I would like to ask this about the SEC tournament. It's a great event. We've been a million times. I know y'all love it, calling it and so on, and it's great baseball. But so South Carolina, when they were winning big, KP, didn't do squat in the SEC tournament. Vandy a couple of years ago rolled through it, won the Natty. Arkansas just rolled through it, and they're the favorite. How do you look at the fact that Mississippi State went 2 in barbecue and got run ruled twice last week? Or does it mean anything tomorrow once they walk out on the field at 2 o'clock?
I don't think it means a thing, and the flip side of it is I don't think it means a thing that Arkansas rolled through and won it, or Tennessee got to the final. It's 5 days, and I would prefer to look at 11 weeks or 14 weeks as opposed to 5 days and try to figure out who somebody is, because I think that's usually the way that this game plays out for the most part. Now, that being said, you got to show up these next 4 days or you're not going to be playing anymore. But no, I don't know. I think it gives us something to talk about, and by us, I'm saying me and you, because we were talking about the same thing in Hoover. The times that South Carolina came down, didn't do anything, and then the flip side is, Vanderbilt beats everybody in 19, rolls through and wins the whole thing. I think the easy answer is there's no formula. The formula is you get hot now, and what happened last weekend, it would appear, at least historically, really doesn't have any bearing on what happens this weekend.
All right, I agree. Kyle Peterson on the Modelo guest line. Let's talk about Tony Vitello and Dave Van Horn, because I'm loving some of this. There's nothing wrong with the little chatter and mixing it up. Vitello was under Van Horn. He's done an amazing job at Tennessee. He may be at LSU in a few weeks. But, talk about when you, as someone who covers the game, who played the game at a high level, what did you make of their back and forth a couple of weeks ago and then them facing off again on Championship Sunday in Hoover, KP?
It gets your attention just because, they're exchanging pleasantries fairly close. I didn't really think about it afterwards because, if you've played, everybody's had those. And sometimes you have them with your best friends. Now, I'm not saying those guys are best friends. I think that they're cordial. And I think that both of them probably looked at it afterwards as, all right, whatever, it's done. I mean, we're competing. We compete at a high level the entire weekend. Arkansas wins one on the road. The crowd's going nuts. Probably the biggest weekend that weekend in Vanderbilt that Tony's had as a head coach up to that point. So he's juiced up. Said something that he regrets. He said that in the postgame. It gets DVH fired up. They go toe-to-toe for a minute, walk away, call it good. Yeah. They shook hands in the finals of the SEC tournament. It looked normal. So it's interesting. I'll give you that. Just because conflict is interesting. That's the way we're all wired. But I don't think there's anything more to it now.
Kyle Peterson on the Out of Bounds show. Let's discuss the LSU job here for a second. Top 5 job. Mainieri did a super job. Is there any doubt in your mind that they poach a sitting head coach?
No, it's just who. I want to go back to what you said a minute ago because I don't think it's said enough. Paul did a really good job, like an amazing job at that place, because there's a lot of incredible fan bases, and there's a Mississippi State is a job like this, Ole Miss a job like this. There's no job like LSU that you have to, from a fan base standpoint, from an interaction standpoint, from a history standpoint, from a skip standpoint, there's so many different narratives. And I know Chris has talked about this, Mike's talked about it. Like, you got to be on 24/7. You go to get the mail, you better be on, because Johnny and Jimmy may ride by and they're huge fans, and you got to be on. Paul's had to be on for 15 years every single day. And they won. They won a national title. They were consistently in the postseason. It wouldn't shock me if they make another run here in the next few weeks, because I think they are good enough. But for that job, you're not a baseball coach. You're a CEO. And I think that's the biggest thing and I'm sure that that's what Chris is looking for right now, is you have to find a CEO. Because if you find a baseball coach, it won't work. It just won't. There's too many other ancillary things that come with it.
Agree on that, too. Tony Vitello, talk about the job that he's done at Tennessee. They've won a little bit over the years, but, I grew up on this, and we never talked about Tennessee baseball for the most part. They've had their moments here and there, but he's done a remarkable job. Talk about his last 4 or 5 years in Knoxville.
Since Delmonico left, excuse me, there really hadn't been a lot of Tennessee baseball history. The Tennessee baseball history is, did they get to Hoover and what did they do? And they've never won in Hoover. They've never won the whole thing since it's been in Hoover. When they won the SEC tournament, it was actually in Knoxville. So there's history there, but it was 15 years ago history, 20 years ago history. And if you spin it as fast as he spun it in that league, I'm sure there's a comparable somewhere, but there aren't many, because you can spin programs in certain areas of the country. It's really hard to spin one in that league, because everybody else is getting better at the exact same time. And what he did, I think, is pretty phenomenal. It's just stair step. 2 years ago, in 19, they're in a regional, obviously, and in a really good spot. And this year, I think they're one of the best teams in the country. I watched them for 5 straight days, and there's not a lot of holes there, man. They're old in the spots that you want to be old. They're defensive in the spots you want to be defensive. I think the staff has some depth. The bullpen doesn't have a ton of, it doesn't have a Sims. It doesn't have a Cops. It doesn't have a guy that's going to, 3 guys that are coming in and throw 95, but they got guys that throw a ton of strikes. I think they're really complete, and I think he's done a hell of a job.
Do you think he's the next coach at LSU?
I don't. No.
Wow.
I don't think he leaves.
Okay.
I don't think he leaves. I think that there's a lot of positives come out of this for Tennessee, and this is a gut. That's a gut feel. That's it. But I think this will push Tennessee over the edge to do the things from a facility standpoint that they've needed to do for the last decade. Is now they look at it and go, whoa, hold on. We can't lose that dude. And yeah, you're right. We do need to do a lot of things, and I think you're going to see a lot of things in Tennessee done as quick as they can possibly do it now.
All right, Kyle Peterson, National College baseball analyst with ESPN and the SEC Network, joining us on the Modelo guest line. There's rumors that Schlossnagle has been wanting to maybe move around here. I mean, Dan McDonnell was frustrated throughout the season. Maybe he's shaking that off because of not, fans and so on and so forth. Sitting head coaches don't move around. You know this in college baseball like they do in football and hoops. So interesting to see what Scott Woodward and Ross Bjork can do at LSU and A&M.
Let me say one thing real quick. You probably got to go break, but with this A&M, LSU, potential moving parts, I will tell you this with 100% certainty. It's not just making guys money that are going those two places. It's making a lot more guys money across the country.
Yeah.
The price of pool is raising with those two openings.
Yes. All right, we'll see what maybe is Cliff Godwin ready to move. I mean, there's just all sorts of things going on here. All right, I don't have enough time, but I got 2 minutes here. Let me hit the Mississippi State Regional real quick. Virginia Commonwealth VCU hasn't lost since April 11th. You also got Sanford and Campbell in there. What's the biggest problem matchup-wise for Mississippi State this weekend, Kyle?
I mean, it would appear to be VCU, but this is, and it's just the reality that we live in. I just haven't seen them all a lot. I mean, you look them out on paper, and obviously the way that VCU comes in, the biggest advantage that State has is State and them and where they're playing and the environment. I saw this firsthand when Stanford went in there 2 years ago, and Stanford was a pretty good club. But in retrospect, and I talked to David Esker afterwards about it, they didn't know what they were walking into because there's no comparative on the West Coast. There's just not. And really there's no even if you travel somewhere in March, there's no comparative to what you're going to find in Starkville on Saturday night when everybody's there and it's going nuts. And I think that's the biggest advantage. When you get programs that are coming in that have not played in those environments, you have a distinct advantage. And I think that's the biggest advantage that State has.
Kyle Peterson on the Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone with ESPN and the SEC Network. Now, you're calling the Ole Miss game this weekend. Is that right?
Yeah, I've got that regional from the friendly confines of my home. And then hopefully we are back on the road next week because I didn't forget, but experiencing it last week in Hoover it had been 21 months since I had done a baseball game in person.
Wow.
So it was time.
Kyle Peterson on the Out of Bounds Show. Thanks, KP. We appreciate it.
All right, man. All good.
So a little bit there on Ole Miss and Hail State regionals. The LSU job opening. Tony Vitello, does he stay in Knoxville, Tennessee? Or does he head out? I do agree with KP that it's going to make a lot of dudes a lot of money. That is for sure. Is there a sitting head coach that's been at, his school for 5, 10, 15 years that is ready to move? Most of these guys don't move. They don't leave. Schlossnagle and, Corb. Well, Ron Polk never left. And Bianco's been in Ole Miss for 20 years. Dan McDonnell looks, 14 years all of a sudden now at Louisville and so on. I don't know. More on the way. Out of Bounds. 105.9 The Zone. ESPN, brought to you by Mississippi Ag and agup.com.